I was flipping burgers by the pond behind my house, the one I built myself 2 summers ago with blood, sweat, and a backhoe rental, when I heard the unmistakable sound of heels clacking through grass. That could only mean one thing. Fellera Kingsley, the HOA president, was on the warpath again. "Trevor Callahan," she barked, her voice shrill enough to scare the geese off the water. "You can't have open flames within 50 feet of a water feature. It's in the bylaws." I didn't even look up. "Hey Fellera, first of all, it's a propane grill. Second, this is my pond on my property." "You got no jurisdiction back here," she huffed, hands on hips. "That pond is viewed from the public walking trail. That makes it a community aesthetic zone. We voted on it." I turned around, spat my chewing gum into the trash can, and locked eyes with her. "You mean you and your 4 buddies at the last HOA meeting voted on it? I never got a notice." "You missed the meeting. That's not my fault," she snapped, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling the police. This is a safety hazard and a bylaw violation." I laughed. "You're calling the cops because I'm grilling burgers by a pond?" She didn't answer. She was already barking into her phone like she was reporting a hostage situation. I watched her walk back toward the curb, pointing toward my house like she was directing a SWAT team. 5 minutes later, 2 cruisers rolled up. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked up the hill to meet them. One of the officers stepped out, gave me a puzzled look, then glanced toward Fellera, who was practically vibrating with self-importance. "She's grilling meat on an open flame near a pond during fire season," Fellera said, jabbing a finger toward me. "He's violating HOA fire codes and threatening community safety." The cop looked at me. "Sir, can you explain?" "Sure," I said. "That pond is entirely on my property. I've got the survey papers in my garage if you want proof. It's propane, not charcoal. There's no fire ban today, and she doesn't have authority back there." The second officer raised an eyebrow. "You got the paperwork?" "Absolutely." I walked them to the garage and handed over the folder I kept for moments exactly like this. Original land survey, HOA boundary maps, county fire code exemptions, all of it in plastic sleeves. They looked it over for maybe 30 seconds before the first officer turned back toward Fellera. "Ma'am, he's not breaking any laws." Fellera's jaw dropped. "What? He's a menace. He built that pond without HOA approval." The officer crossed his arms. "That's a civil matter. We're not getting involved." As they left, Fellera barked after them, "You haven't heard the last of this." I went back to my grill, flipped another burger, and looked out over the pond. That's when it hit me. She said I built the pond without HOA approval. But the HOA doesn't have any authority over backyard landscaping unless it's visible from the front curb. That's what the bylaws say. I knew that because I'd read all 62 pages of the HOA charter 3 months ago when they fined me for painting my mailbox. And if she was going to play dirty and try to get me in trouble for grilling, maybe it was time I dug into her little empire. Because here's the thing Fellera didn't know. I'm a licensed land use attorney, and I've been real patient with their nonsense for 2 years. But this. Calling the cops on me while I'm grilling burgers. That was the last straw. 2 days after Burgergate, I dropped a thick envelope into the outgoing mailbox at City Hall. Inside were copies of the HOA's charter, a certified land survey, municipal zoning codes, and a formal complaint addressed to the County Compliance Division. I even highlighted the sections proving the HOA had overstepped twice. Once for trying to regulate private space outside their jurisdiction, and another for failing to notify homeowners of changes to the charter. Fellera had filed that bogus Community Aesthetic Zone amendment without a single public notice or vote from a quorum. That alone, by statute, was grounds for HOA suspension. Later that afternoon, I parked at the edge of the cul-de-sac and watched a delivery van roll up the main road. The driver stepped out and handed a bundle of certified letters to a kid on a scooter. I knew what those were: formal notices from the county's legal oversight office. Every board member would be getting one. The kid zipped off, clueless he was delivering the first cracks in their little empire. That same evening, I decided to walk the trail that ran parallel to the backyards. It was mostly quiet, save for the occasional jogger. I passed the Jacobs Place retired couple always kept to themselves. Their shed had a bright red sticker on it now, non-compliant structure subject to penalty. That was new. I knocked on their door. Mrs. Jacobs opened it, clutching a teacup. "Oh, hello, Trevor. Everything all right?" Just out stretching my legs. "Noticed the sticker on your shed," she sighed. "Fellora said it was 2 inches taller than regulation. We built that thing 20 years ago, same design in the HOA handbook." I nodded. "Did she give you a notice before tagging it?" She put the sticker on while we were at church. I pressed my lips together. "Mind if I take a photo of it?" She blinked. "Why? Because if she applied that sticker without due process, I can use it to show enforcement abuse." Mrs. Jacobs stepped aside. "Be my guest." I snapped 3 photos, including the date stamp and HOA letterhead on the sticker. That made 4 separate incidents of overreach in the last 30 days. I didn't need more, but I was beginning to realize this wasn't isolated, it was a pattern. The next morning, I paid a visit to Glenn, a locksmith I'd helped with legal zoning advice a few years back when he opened his shop. I found him elbow deep in a deadbolt mechanism. "You still do surveillance installs?" I asked. He looked up. "You got a problem?" "Possibly. I need a camera watching the side of my house, facing the trail. Motion activated, infrared too, and legal to use on private property." He scratched his chin. "You think someone's messing around? I think they already are." By sundown, Glenn had finished the install. Tucked beneath the eaves, the camera was impossible to spot unless you knew exactly where to look. It synced to a secure cloud account and pinged my phone when movement occurred after midnight. That same night, I got an alert at 2:43 in the morning. I sat up, opened the app, and stared. There was a figure in a dark hoodie crouching behind my fence, holding a clipboard and flashlight. They were snapping photos of what, I couldn't tell, but they weren't on the public path. They were on my grass. I downloaded the footage, saved the timecode, and filed a trespassing report online. By noon the next day, a deputy had been by to collect the footage. He didn't say much, but I saw the way his eyebrows lifted when I showed him the boundary line. Meanwhile, Fellora was doubling down. 2 new violation notices arrived in my mailbox that morning. One claimed my pond caused excessive mosquito breeding, citing a fabricated clause. The other said I had unauthorized outdoor structures, meaning the gazebo I'd built 5 years ago with a permit. I took both letters, walked them straight to the code enforcement desk at City Hall, and requested a fraud investigation. By Thursday, the county HOA Oversight Board had called an emergency hearing. The hearing room was packed. A few neighbors sat in back rows, whispering. Fellora strutted in with 2 board members flanking her like bodyguards. I sat quietly at the front, briefcase in hand. The chair of the Oversight Board, a no-nonsense woman named Carla Alvarez, opened the meeting. Today's agenda concerns multiple allegations of procedural violations, enforcement misconduct, and possible document forgery by the Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association. Fellora stood immediately. "This is a smear campaign by one disgruntled homeowner who refuses to respect community standards." Carla raised a hand. "You'll speak when recognized." Fellora sat, lips pressed tight. I stepped up and opened my case file. One by one, I laid out every documented instance of abuse. The unauthorized sticker on the Jacobs shed, the falsified aesthetic zone amendment, the trespassing incident caught on video, the fabricated mosquito claim, the attempt to regulate structures outside their jurisdiction. When I showed the surveillance footage, the room went quiet. "That individual in the video," I said, "is within my private property boundary at 2:43 in the morning." I cross-referenced the height and build with known photos of Miss Kingsley. Fellora shot to her feet. "I demand to see legal counsel before you make slanderous accusations." Carla didn't flinch. "This video, paired with your enforcement record, is enough to warrant a full audit. Until then, all HOA activities are suspended pending investigation." Fellera's face turned the color of a fire hydrant. And, Carla continued, if we find evidence of forged documents or unauthorized surveillance, this matter will be referred to the district attorney's office. The next part happened faster than I expected. 3 days later, the county posted a notice on the HOA bulletin board. Cedar Ridge HOA operations suspended pending legal review. Fellera's name was removed from all official listings, but the real blow came a week later, when a quiet man in a gray suit visited the neighborhood. He went door to door not with warnings, but with a petition. Turns out, nearly half the residents had been fined or threatened under Fellera's reign. Once the petition passed the required percentage, the HOA was dissolved under Article 31 of the Charter, which allowed for voluntary dissolution in cases of systemic misconduct. The mailbox where she used to post her weekly memos. Empty, the boardroom she used for her meetings. Locked. And her house, for sale. She left in the middle of the night, according to the Jacobs. No goodbye, no explanation, just a cold for sale sign and a trail of angry neighbors finally breathing easy. I stood by my pond that evening, flipping burgers again. This time, a few neighbors joined me. The Jacobs brought lemonade. Glenn brought ribs. Someone even brought fireworks. And as the smoke curled into the sky, I couldn't help but think, turns out, grilling by a pond wasn't just a pastime. It was the spark that burned their whole crooked system down. The neighborhood was quieter now, no newsletters shoved in mailboxes, no clipboard patrols timing grass height, no anonymous violation slips tucked under porch mats. But something still felt off. That kind of control doesn't vanish, it hides, waits, regroups. I knew Fellera was gone. The house was empty, the shutters drawn, the mailbox taped shut. But on the fourth Saturday after the HOA was formally dissolved, I noticed an unfamiliar SUV parked in her driveway, out of state plates. A man in a blazer leaned against the hood, tapping away on a tablet. 2 hours later, another car showed up. This one had tinted windows and a county badge magnet on the door. The driver didn't even glance at the house. He walked straight up to the mailbox post and inspected the foundation with a small flashlight, even though it was broad daylight. I walked over, hands in my jacket pockets. "You looking for something?" I asked. The man turned. Mid-50s, tired eyes, sharp jawline. "Trevor Callahan," I nodded. He pulled a laminated ID from his coat. "Detective Mason, County White Collar Crimes Division." I raised an eyebrow. "You're a long way from the usual HOA drama." "This isn't about drama," he said. "It's about money." I stepped closer. "What kind of money?" He glanced at the SUV, then lowered his voice. "We've got reason to believe Fellera Kingsley used HOA funds to create a slush account. That account was then funneled into 2 shell companies, both registered to an address in Arizona that doesn't exist." I whistled low. "And you think she was embezzling from the HOA?" "We don't think. We know." We traced over $75,000 in transactions that matched the HOA's monthly dues. The kicker is, the companies were listed as landscape contractors and community improvement consultants. You ever see anyone doing work around here under those names? "Never," I said. "And I built half the damn pond myself," he nodded. "That's what I figured." She found a cushy way to siphon funds without raising suspicion, burying it under vague project names and inflated invoices. We've got county auditors reviewing the entire HOA financial history. I looked toward the house. "So why's the car still here?" "She skipped town weeks ago. That's the other reason I'm here." He pulled a folded sheet from his pocket. "We issued a warrant for unlawful financial conduct and fraudulent misrepresentation of fiduciary responsibility." I opened the paper. It was signed and sealed by a Superior Court judge. Fellera Kingsley was officially a fugitive. "She's not just facing civil penalties," Mason said. "She could be looking at real time." That night, I pulled out my old scanner from the garage, the one I'd used back in law school when I interned with a city investigator. I started scanning every HOA document I'd ever received: letters, fines, memos, and especially anything with a budget line. I built a digital archive and flagged every mention of the two shell companies Mason had named. Evergreen Civic Partners and Blue Ridge Design Group. I found 15 references spanning 18 months, the most damning. A newsletter from last spring claiming the HOA had partnered with Blue Ridge Design Group to assess long-term community enhancement options. The newsletter even included a staged photo of Fellera shaking hands with a man in front of a van with a logo I now knew was photoshopped. I emailed everything to Mason. 48 hours later, a federal agent knocked on my door. "You're the one who sent those files?" he asked. "That's right." He handed me a plain envelope. Inside was a document titled Petition for Community Restitution and Civil Recovery. It granted temporary administrative authority to a new neighborhood committee, one elected by homeowners, not imposed. "You've been named interim steward," the agent said. "Until a formal transition can occur, you're deputizing me," he shrugged. "You're the only one with a clean paper trail and enough legal background to manage the mess." I stared at the paper. "I never asked to run this place." "Doesn't matter," he said. "You're the only one who didn't ask for power that everyone trusts." So now I was chairing weekly meetings in the library study room, sitting beside neighbors who used to avoid eye contact. The old HOA board had vanished. 2 of them had lawyered up. 1 was cooperating with investigators. The rest. Radio silence. But the real bomb dropped the following week. Mason called. "We got a tip. Fellera's been spotted in Nevada. She's using a fake name, Rita Langston, and trying to buy property under an LLC. They gonna move in on her." "Already did," he said. "She's in custody." I didn't celebrate. Not right away. Instead, I walked to the Jacobs place. Their shed, the one she tried to condemn, now had a fresh coat of paint and a new weather vane. Mr. Jacobs was trimming the edge of his lawn. "She's been arrested," I said. He didn't look up. "About time." "I'm heading up the transition committee." He paused, then stood upright. "You got your work cut out for you." We stood in silence for a few moments. Birds chirped in the distance. Somewhere, a kid was learning to ride a bike. "People are angry," I said. "They want answers." "Then give them answers," he said. "Just don't give them another Fellera." I spent the next 3 weeks drafting a new charter, not just rewording the old one. I gutted the enforcement clauses, rewrote the budget protocols, and added 2 critical safeguards: full financial transparency and mandatory homeowner voting for any future changes. Every line was reviewed by a municipal attorney. In the final meeting before ratification, I stood at the front of the room and laid it all out. "No more secret votes," I said. "No more fines without appeal. No more contracts to ghost companies. From now on, this neighborhood decides how it's run." One by one, the residents signed the document. The last signature came from Mrs. Phelps, a retired nurse who once had her flower beds dug up by Fellera's cousin because the mulch wasn't regulation color. As she signed, she looked at me. "I didn't know who to trust anymore," she said. "But you grilled burgers while the empire burned." That counts for something. By summer's end, the neighborhood had changed, not just administratively, but in spirit. People waved more. They lingered on porches. A few even started a garden co-op. Fellera's house sold to a young couple with a toddler and a rescue mutt. They planted wildflowers in the front yard and added a porch swing. No one stopped them. No one wrote them up. And no one ever dared mention the phrase community aesthetic zone again. Exactly 12 weeks after the final vote dissolved the HOA, I received a certified envelope with a wax seal and a return address from the County Superior Court. Inside was a summons to appear as a witness in the case of Kingsley v. State, scheduled for the following month. I wasn't surprised I'd been the one to uncover the forged invoices and hand-deliver them to the auditors, but what did catch me off guard was the second document, a subpoena for digital evidence. Every photo, every video, every document I had archived during the fallout was now part of a criminal trial. I made 3 encrypted backups and delivered them to the courthouse clerk the same afternoon. 2 days later, A prosecutor named Elena Mathers showed up at my doorstep with a legal pad and a no-nonsense haircut. "I'm building the timeline," she said as she stepped into my living room. "I need the missing 3 weeks between the initial HOA audit and Fellera's disappearance." I pointed to the coffee table, where I had already laid out a physical timeline. Dated photos, HOA newsletters, a copy of the community's dissolved charter with timestamps, and a map with annotated property lines. "You're the first witness I've met who already had exhibit boards," she said, flipping through the pages. "I'm not just a witness. I lived through the entire thing," I said. "She didn't just mismanage funds. She leveraged fake violations to pressure homeowners into paying off settlements that were never filed. At least 6 residents told me they paid her directly to avoid fines that didn't exist." Elena paused. "Did they write checks? Cash?" She called them community donations. Her pen froze. "That's racketeering," I nodded. "And extortion if you ask me." She tapped the edge of the legal pad. "We've got bank records showing large cash deposits in staggered intervals. If your neighbors are willing to testify, we can add 6 more felony counts. I'll talk to them, but they're skittish." She scared people with legal threats and weaponized bylaws like a personal club. Elena stood. "Let me worry about the courtroom. You bring me the voices." The next 3 days were a whirlwind. I visited every home that had been targeted: families who'd been fined for garage door colors, retirees who'd been threatened over imaginary leaf ordinances, single parents who'd paid to avoid having their fences condemned. Every one of them signed affidavits. I delivered them to Elena, who added them to the case file and told me to clear my schedule for the entire trial week. The courthouse was packed on the first day. Press lined the steps, murmuring about the HOA Queenpin case. Inside, the courtroom buzzed as the clerk read the charges: embezzlement, wire fraud, racketeering, falsification of public documents, and obstruction of justice. Fellera sat at the defendant's table in a charcoal suit, stone-faced, jaw locked tight. Not a single member of the former board showed up. When I was called to the stand, I walked past her without looking. Elena led the questioning. "Mr. Callahan, can you confirm your professional background?" Licensed land use attorney. "I specialize in municipal zoning and community governance." "And do you reside in the neighborhood where the defendant acted as HOA president?" "Yes, for 5 years." "Did you receive any notice regarding the creation of a community aesthetic zone around your backyard pond?" "No." "The first I heard of it was when she called the police on me for grilling burgers." A chuckle rippled through the gallery. The judge didn't bother to gavel it down. Elena continued. "Did you investigate the legality of that new regulation?" "Yes. It had no basis in the charter. No vote, no amendment process, and no homeowner awareness." "And what did you discover regarding HOA finances?" I handed the bailiff a flash drive. "These are the documents Fellera submitted to justify monthly dues increases. Several invoices listed companies that don't exist. One of them, Blue Ridge Design Group, is registered to a storage unit in Phoenix that's been vacant for 18 months. Elena clicked a remote. The screen behind me lit up with a spreadsheet, red flags marking repeat entries. "And what about enforcement?" she asked. She issued over 40 violation notices in 60 days, most of which cited rules that didn't exist. Several residents were told they could make them go away for a cash payment. And the funds, deposited into 3 personal accounts under aliases, then funneled into a shell company she controlled. That got the jury's attention. Every one of them leaned forward. Elena gave a slight nod. No further questions. Fellera's attorney, a narrow-eyed man with a clipped tone, stood. "Mr. Callahan, isn't it true that you had a personal grudge against my client?" "I had a personal stake that got cold while she called the cops on me." A few jurors cracked smiles. The judge let it slide. "Did you ever try to resolve these matters without legal action?" "I tried attending board meetings. She locked the doors and told me I wasn't on the agenda." "No further questions," he muttered, sitting down. The trial lasted 4 days. On the final day, Elena called a surprise witness, a former HOA board member named Carla Stevenson, who had quietly resigned 8 weeks before the collapse. "Miss Stevenson," Elena asked, "why did you leave the board?" "Because Fellera told us we could earn a retirement bonus if we signed off on the landscaping contracts without asking questions." "Did she explain where the money came from?" "She said it was from a discretionary beautification fund, but I saw the bank statements." "It was the dues, all of it." "And did you receive this bonus?" Carla looked down. "Yes, $2,000. Elena turned to the judge. "The state moves to file an additional charge of bribery." The judge nodded. "Granted." Fellera didn't flinch. But her lawyer leaned over and whispered something. For the first time, her mouth twisted not in confidence but panic. The verdict came 2 hours later, guilty on all counts. The sentencing hearing followed a week later. The judge handed down 8 years in state prison with no parole for 5. Full restitution ordered. Civil penalties applied. Community ban on holding any administrative position for life. When it was over, I walked home under a sky that felt brighter than it had in years. The next morning, the new neighborhood council met in the old boardroom. We tore down the framed photo of Fellera that had hung near the door and replaced it with a corkboard labeled "Community Wins." The first pinned item was a photo of the Jacobs' newly repainted shed. No one raised their voice. No one passed judgment. For the first time in a long time, it felt like a neighborhood and not a regime. At sunset, I returned to the pond. The grill was hot, the burgers sizzled, and the scent of charcoal drifted through the breeze. This time, I wasn't alone. Families gathered, kids played along the water's edge, and laughter replaced the low-level tension that had once lingered in every trimmed hedge and painted curb. I didn't need a title. I didn't need a gavel or a clipboard. All I needed was a community that remembered who it was before fear took root. And this time, that community wasn't going to forget.